Good morning. Welcome into First Take on a Monday. Hope you all had a lovely weekend. Stephen A., Max Kellerman. I'm Molly Karam. How we doing, gentlemen?
Oh, ready to go today. We got some topics.
We got a lot to get into today. That is for sure. So let's do what we do. Coming up, Tony Romo, unfortunately injured again. Don't miss the guy's reaction, and should he hang it up? That's coming up a little bit later in the show. But we want to start with the 49ers' Colin Kaepernick, who refused to stand during the National Anthem Friday due to his views on the country's treatment of racial minorities. He's been outspoken on his Twitter account on civil rights and issues in support of the Black Lives Matter movement. Kaepernick addressed his actions again yesterday with the media and said he will continue to sit for the anthem until he sees change.
I mean, ultimately, it's to bring awareness and make people, realize what's really going on in this country. There are a lot of things that are going on that are unjust, people aren't being held accountable for, and that's something that needs to change. That's something that, this country stands for freedom, liberty, justice for all, and it's not happening for all right now. These aren't new situations. This isn't new ground. It's things that have gone on in this country for years and years and have never been addressed. I'll continue to sit. I'm going to continue to stand with the people that are being oppressed. To me, this is something that has to change. And when there's significant change, and I feel like that flag represents what it's supposed to represent, and this country is representing people the way that it's supposed to, I'll stand.
There has been no shortage of reaction to Kaepernick's actions. Among those offering their opinion is Kaepernick's former teammate and current Vikings lineman Alex Boone. Take a listen.
I was upset and disappointed. I mean, like I had said earlier, that flag gives you the right to do whatever you want, and I understand that. And Anquan said that, and I agree with that. But at the same time, you have to show some respect, especially in this position that we're in, where we're playing a game for a living, and it's almost like disrespectful to, you see all these pictures of these veterans that have no legs and they're standing up in their wheelchair, and I had a brother that served and he lost friends, and I know how much it means to him, and it's shameful.
Stephen A., do you like, love, or hate Kaepernick's protest?
I liked it. I didn't love it because I'm not going to say that I would have done the same thing in terms of protesting with the national anthem because of how it could be interpreted. And I'm certainly not going to say I hate it, A, because he had every right to do what he did. We're talking about First Amendment of the Constitution, where it gives you the freedom of speech. Definitely he exercised his right. And I want to make sure that I make this point before I get into what I have to say, Max, about specifically what Colin Kaepernick did. There are a lot of people out there that think about the national anthem and think about the flag. And, they've been getting on Colin Kaepernick because they say it's disrespectful to our American soldiers. I want to emphatically state that I disagree with that. They are absolutely flat out wrong. The soldiers who put their lives on the line and sacrifice themselves for our country, they don't sacrifice themselves so you can do what they want you to do. They've sacrificed themselves so you can do what the Constitution allows you to do, that you can uphold that. That's what they fought for your right to do what Colin Kaepernick did. They didn't do that so you could sit up, so you could stand up at attention at their beck and call. They say you want the freedom of religion, freedom of speech, etc. This is what comes with it. It's the First Amendment of the United States Constitution. That is what Colin Kaepernick exercised. So when people bring up our military and they bring up our soldiers as it pertains to his refusal to stand and salute during our national anthem, that's a problem, because they're not paying attention to what our country is founded upon and what, our rules, our laws, etc. are based upon. So I wanted to say that. Having said all of that, Colin Kaepernick brought attention to something that, by and large, folks had better recognize the black community is feeling very, very adamant about. He was talking about police brutality. He's obviously a staunch supporter of Black Lives Matter. And though some people may disagree with some of the actions we've seen of few folks who represent Black Lives Matter in terms of how they've conducted themselves, by and large, the attention brought to the issue is something that's undeniable. The need for the attention brought to this issue, it's absolutely undeniable. Now, we were in Chicago the other day talking about black-on-black violence and various other things, and we know that that's a prevalent issue. That's something that I've been screaming about for the last couple of years, primarily. There's no doubt that that's an issue that cannot be ignored. It's an issue that needs to be addressed. I think that issue is bigger than anything affecting the African-American community personally. Having said all of that, that in no way diminishes the importance of brutality on the part of some police officers and how that has resonated throughout the black community. And Colin Kaepernick's willingness to bring that up in this fashion is something, again, I'm not going to say I love it because I would have found a different means of doing it, but I'm not going to hate on him for it either. He's conscientious enough. He's studied enough. He wanted to bring attention to it. He didn't drop any bombs on anybody. He didn't shoot anybody. He didn't harm anybody. He made a quiet, personal protest. And for people to react this way in an incendiary fashion, I'm going to agree with my man Sean King for the New York Daily News when he pointed out that's their problem. That's not Colin Kaepernick's problem. I've got more to say, but I definitely want to hear what you have to say, Max. But I don't really have a problem with it. Again, it's not the ideal way in which to do it, but what we must applaud to Colin Kaepernick more so than anything else, he personified what a protest is supposed to be. We can get into it a little bit later, but as much as I applaud CP3 and Dwayne Wade and Carmelo Anthony and LeBron James and how they opened the ESPYs, they brought attention to a particular subject that's permeating our society. They should be applauded for it, as they were, but at the same time, they in no way forced anybody to take sides. They in no way forced anybody to take a position one way or the other. It was indisputable what their argument is. Colin Kaepernick is forcing you to take sides. That, to me, is the personification of what any kind of protest, quiet or otherwise, is all about. And I applaud him for that.
I'm not going to say I love it for the same reason, because if you say you love it, it sounds like you don't love America, and I love America, and I know you do too.
That's right.
And one of the reasons I love America is because this is such an American thing for Colin Kaepernick to have done. You don't have to stand. And in my opinion, he should love America for that. And I'm sure he does love his right to do that. And for those who think that so here's the irony. For those who protest by not standing up, you get to sit down because you're an American. You don't have to stand up because you're an American. But the irony for the people who complain about it, he should stand up, is that if it's compulsory, in other words, if you have to stand up or it's unpatriotic, then if you stand, you're not necessarily showing anything that's patriotic. It's not a choice you're making. It's something that everyone's supposed to do. How is that really an act of patriotism? And when people bring up veterans, which is nothing Colin Kaepernick brought up, he brought up a domestic policing issue. When people bring up, oh, the veterans stand, so you should stand, that's kind of a buzzword. It's a catch-all. Oh, back off, because when you hear veterans, who doesn't support our men and women in uniform, even if you don't support all of our foreign policy, we all support our men and women in uniform. So people say, veterans stand up, you should too, and that's supposed to get everyone to back off. And I think that's kind of, you're trying to intimidate someone off of their stand. Here's what it seems to me that Colin Kaepernick is saying, and I have no problem with this. He's protesting the manifestation of this country's original sin, as Professor Dr. Michael Eric Dyson brought up in Chicago the other day on our show. He's protesting the manifestation of this country's original sin. And it seems to, which is, obviously slavery and the racism, the institutional racism that black people have been dealing with and our country has been dealing with since then. And it seems to me that Kaepernick is saying that his conscience won't allow him to stand until there is some remedy. There have been plenty of remedies. Things have gotten a lot better, but he feels that it's still not remedied. And by the way, when you look at differences in per capita income, education, and the way the police treat people, obviously he's not wrong about that. It hasn't been perfectly remedied. Then the question becomes, do you feel that we should honor how far we've come, or should we protest how far we still must go? And Kaepernick's personality and his own sensibilities tell him he must protest how far there still is to go. And that's what's great about living in this country. You can, and rather than try to create social pressure to coerce him to behave like everyone else and just to conform, how about acknowledging the fact that he has something to say?
Well, you acknowledge the fact that he has something to say, but let's take this to another level. Let's understand something. This, to me, is the greatest country in the world. To me and most black folks I know, we can talk all the stuff we want to. We ain't trying to go nowhere else, okay? But what we also need to recognize is that we're not trying to go anywhere else primarily because we're in this country, because we hear all day long about the liberties that come associated with being an American citizen. And we see people, taking boats, putting their lives in danger, crossing barriers and beyond to get to this country, which speaks to the greatness of America. We understand all of that. However, by virtue of looking at the other things that take place in other parts of this world, whether it's Iraq, it's Syria, it's Yemen, it's Mexico, for crying out loud, where the list goes on and on. Because we're willing, or because we've had it thrown in our face, rather, what takes place in other parts of this world where they don't have liberties that we have.
Russia, Turkey, Venezuela.
That speaks to the greatness of America. The problem with that is that black folks are saying, okay, that's fine, good and dandy, but what about us? And what about we're dealing with while we're here? Because when you talk about brutality on the part of police, and the reason why I phrase it that way, just for everybody out there, is because there are black police officers, there's Latino police officers, there are white police officers, and by and large, approximately 95%, if not better, are law-abiding citizens who go about the business of protecting and serving our communities every single day. We're talking about the actions of a few rogue individuals who happen to be wearing police uniforms that conduct themselves in insidious fashions. Having said all of that, because it transpires, because what Dr. Dyson pointed out, how you are licensed by the state to be enforcement officials, yet you're getting away with conducting yourself in this fashion. And then Colin Kaepernick alluded to paid leave, which is another way of saying a vacation, for crying out loud, in a lot of people's eyes, while black folks are laying in the streets. Those are very, very real issues. And what it brings us back to is a reality that a lot of folks in America do not want to accept. We have come a long way. We are better today than we were 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 40, 50 years ago. But that does not negate the fact that in the eyes of a vast majority of African Americans in this country, this is still a racist society. It is still a racist environment that black people are subjected to every single day. Per capita income, education, etc., etc. Again, I'm big on the fact that we got to address our own issues. Everything ain't everyone else's fault. Some things we have to own. But the flip side is that's not a license for white Americans to walk around ignoring the iniquities exercised by some people from their community against black people, too. It's not a license to ignore that or forget that. And that's what Colin Kaepernick is saying.
If you're dealing with the content of his actual point, he has a strong point to make about his own conscience and what he feels the flag should stand for ideally, and whether or not we're living up to our ideals, and whether that allows him to stand up for that or protest it to bring awareness. The content of his point is one issue, and then there's the issue of this kind of sense of mass coercion. In other words, you have to stand up for the flag. The thing about the United States of America that makes us different from many other places is not simply that we're a pure democracy. In other words, that the majority rules. It's that we're a republic. It's that the minority is safe, protected from the tyranny of the majority. And that goes for the way our political system is set up, and I like to think that goes for our kind of reaction, our social reaction to someone who takes this kind of stand, whether or not it's popular, and you can agree or disagree or deal with the content of Colin Kaepernick's message. The idea that there should be this pressure to force him to conform and behave like everyone else is anti-American at its core, at our very foundation. The minority is protected from the tyranny of the majority, and here the majority would like to tyrannize Colin Kaepernick into doing something that he doesn't feel is right, whether or not you agree with his point.
The simpler way to put it is simply this. It personifies what a protest is supposed to be about. You are making a sacrifice here. Colin Kaepernick may very well suffer because of this. This is something we'll get into a little bit later on in the show. He may very well suffer because of this. I want to make sure that I emphasize CP3, D-Wade, Melo, LeBron, they should be applauded for what they did because they made an effort to bring attention to an issue we needed to address in our society. But there's a difference between bringing attention to something and sacrificing. And I'm telling you right now, when you look at what Colin Kaepernick did, this was a sacrifice because anytime change has taken place in our society, in our culture, it has involved sacrifice. It didn't just involve bringing attention to something where all sides could agree and there was no dissenting opinion and there was nothing for anyone to argue about. It is usually when you are willing to put yourself in the eye of the storm, you know, just completely either oblivious to or immune to the potential consequences and ramifications that are going to come your way because you believe so powerfully in such an issue that you are willing to pay a price. Colin Kaepernick, if you read his quote, flat out said, I didn't consult with anybody. I didn't ask for permission. I am fully aware that there are consequences that will come from this. And if it does, so be it. At least at the end of the day, I will look at myself and know that I did the right thing and I was right. That is entirely different than just bringing attention to something. And usually when change takes place in our society, it involves this kind of sacrifice. And on that level, we must respect
so you think this will provoke change more so than what we saw at the ESPN speech?
I think ultimately it will. Here's why. Because at some point, Max, here's what it comes down to. People are going to look at this and have to take sides. When you take sides, you're going to reveal yourself. When you reveal yourself, the divide, the schism that exists within our within our American fabric right now is going to form and it's going to come to the forefront, and that's when things get addressed.
I think that's a strong point. Look, Colin Kaepernick may just have a protest personality. There are types of people, protest personalities, no matter what's going on. It could be better. We're not perfect yet. The world will never be perfect. And so I'm going to stay in a permanent state of protest. And there are others who will recognize how far we've come and honor that and talk about how much it's getting better. There may still be work to be done. So he may just have a protest personality, Colin Kaepernick. But to your point about how it's an inconvenient thing for him to do, when it's a convenient time to protest, how much credit do you get for it? Although I give LeBron and CP3 and Carmelo
all the credit in the world,
a lot of credit, but it still was not going to be an unpopular stance. And they probably have a sense of that when they did it.
You said that weeks ago.
That this is popular to do. When it's least convenient, oftentimes, is when it's most important to do it. And the fact that Kaepernick is sorry right now, he's not on top of the world. He's not a quarterback. No one's saying right now, as people did a couple years ago, he has a chance to be the best quarterback ever. They're saying he may not have an NFL future before this. When that's the moment when you make this stand, that's a very inconvenient time for you. To me, making the protest more authentic. I think it's a sincere protest.
I have nothing to lose because I know I'm out, so I might as well now speak up because I'm done in the NFL.
But that's exactly why I use the word like instead of love. Because the reason I don't love it is because he's opened the floodgates to being scrutinized for his intent. See, if let's say, for example, hypothetically, if this were LeBron, it would be 10 times, it would be even 10 times more profound. You know why? Because it's clear that that's the only reason why. Because LeBron's a champion, and LeBron is an iconic figure, the quintessential global iconic figure in sports in this entire world right now. So for him to take a position like this would be entirely different. With Colin Kaepernick, even though I don't question it, there are those cynics out there who will bring into question the motivation behind all of this, because he's coming off a subpar year. Then they're talking about how his skills have dissipated. His muscle mass ain't the same. His abilities ain't the same. 6 touchdowns, 5 interceptions last year, completed less than 60% of his passes, had a QBR in the 40s. And then it's rumors as to whether or not he may get cut. Right. So now, because of those cynics who may not like what he did, they'll use those other things on the field as an excuse. That's why I didn't love it so much, because he's in a vulnerable position, whereas somebody more elite would not have been vulnerable.
Hey, damn, Cap, while you're down there sitting down, could you grab a weight? Maybe bench press or something while you're sitting down?
No,
Boy, you got to get that muscle mass back.
I agree with what he's standing for, and it's in his right, but I disagree with you guys that this was the best way to handle it. But
I didn't say it was the best way
to debate.
I didn't say it was the best way.
And by the way, how else is he getting? I know it's trite at this point to say, well, he got the conversation started, but this is front page news today. Would it be front page news if he didn't approach it this way?
I specifically said that I don't love it because of, my trepidation about I already explained all of that. But I like it from the standpoint that if you're going to protest, this is the epitome of what a protest is supposed to be. You're supposed to have this kind of impact. Otherwise, why protest? And when you are protesting, if everyone sides with you, something's wrong with that picture. Something's wrong with that.
It's not a genuine protest in the same way. Yeah.
We will leave it there. We heard from the guys. Now we want to hear from you at home. What do you think? Do you have a problem with Kaepernick's national anthem protest? Go on to Twitter now and vote yes or no. We'll reveal those results a little later in the show.